Welcome to InFocus Recouched. It's awesome you could join us.
Yep, sure is. Get ready to be infotained. Yes, you will learn something today, whether you like it or not, and you will enjoy yourself doing it.
Yep, and the first highlight from the InFocus archives we're going to see today looks at an issue that's a bit controversial in some circles. It's child sponsorship.
Ooh, yeah, there's a very polite debate going on amongst aid organisations about this, but we were lucky enough to have here in the studio a man who not only coordinates a child sponsorship program, but was also a sponsored child himself.
Let's check it out.
And I'm really happy to welcome to the studio Mr. Ravi Das. Namaste.
Namaste.
And you're here, and your first visit to Australia from India. But welcome to Australia.
Thank you.
Now, Ravi, your position in India is with the Helping Hands Welfare Society, is that right?
Yes. Helping Hand Welfare Society is a partner agency for Asian Aid.
Okay, so Asian Aid is based here in Australia,
Yes.
but in India it
Yes.
goes by that name. And you're the, what was your job position again?
I'm the coordinator for field officers.
Okay, so the field officers look after the child sponsorship program for Asian Aid, don't they?
Yes,
And
we have 10 field officers who go out in the field meeting children and they give reports, and I see that these reports are reviewed and sent back to Australia and US.
Okay. Now, Ravi, for you, the child sponsorship program is more than a job, isn't it? Because this touches you, very deeply in your own past. You were 5 years old and you were essentially orphaned, weren't you?
Yeah, I was about 6 years old, 5 to 6 years old, when I just first came into Sunshine Home.
Okay, so this is an orphanage in the Bangalore area in India? Yeah.
Sponsored by Asian Aid.
Okay, so how did you come to be in an orphanage?
I grew up in a slum area in Bangalore, and I lived in poverty, and my parents were illiterates, did not have any clue. My father was a very strong alcoholic, and my mother was the only person who took all the initiative to see that she could provide food for the family. And all of a sudden my mother passed away. Things became very difficult that my father was not able to cope. And here was the neighbors bombarding him. Why are you not providing food for the family? And what are you doing as a man? And there was criticism after criticism from neighbors, which ultimately led him to make a strong decision. And the decision that he took was to see that all of us leave this place, go at one time, and the decision that he took was to mix rat poison into the food.
Rat poison?
Yes, into the food, and so that we all could consume together, and we would die together in peace.
So he was going to poison all you 4 children and himself, and you could all just die together, and then he wouldn't have to worry about it.
Absolutely.
Boy, but you're alive today, so obviously that didn't happen.
That didn't happen because God sent an angel who was a neighbor.
Okay.
Not
an actual angel. A neighbor, yeah.
A neighbor who was a very good friend of my mother, who knew my mother's struggle that she's been going through, and she knew of the motives what my father's going to do, and she literally went and spoke to him and said, "Why are you trying to do this to the kids? Why don't you look for another option of seeing that these children, you have such beautiful kids?" And she knew of a home that were picking up babies at Sunshine Home. And she said, "Why don't you leave these kids?" And so that is when, with great difficulty, she tried to convince my father, and then later was able to bring me along with my 2 sisters and knocked at Sunshine Home gate and said...
So Sunshine Home was a new orphanage at that time, wasn't it? So you were one of the first sponsored children at that orphanage, is that right?
Before I could come into Sunshine Home, here was a missionary by name Pastor and Mrs. Watts, who were working in Bangalore.
Where were they from, Australia or America?
They were from America.
America, yeah.
They decided to find stories of babies thrown in the garbage on railway tracks, and she would lovingly go and pick up these babies and nurse them in the very bedroom of theirs.
Oh, okay.
And slowly there were more babies coming in, and the whole room were full of babies, and they did not know what to do. And it was that point of time that I, along with my 2 sisters, also came. So you could imagine in one bedroom somewhere. And
so it wasn't even a proper orphanage
No.
at the time when you were taken in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then her husband, the missionary's husband, asked, "What are you going to do? There's so many babies. What are you going to do?" And this loving Mrs. Dorothy Watts said, "The Lord will provide. Where will these babies go if they didn't have a place?" And so the Lord provided at that point of time. Asian stepped in to sponsor these kids. They needed funds for this to run this orphanage.
Oh, okay.
And miraculously, Asian stepped in, and that is when I received sponsorship.
Okay, wow. So fast forward, so here you are now, qualified with a college degree, married, 2 children of your own. Looking back, if you hadn't been taken into that orphanage, if you hadn't been, sponsored through those years, where would you be now, do you think?
I just cannot even imagine. I'm even scared to think of what would have happened if Asian Aid was not there in my life.
So, Ravi, who was it who was actually your sponsor during this time when you were growing up?
I had such a beautiful sponsor by name Olive May Fisher, who lived in a place called Corranbong.
Okay, right here in New South Wales
Yes.
on the Central Coast. Okay.
And she was the only sponsor who sponsored me right from the time I was a little boy till I finished my college, and a great inspiration to me while I was going through my studies.
Obviously, she was providing money to you on a regular basis, but how do you mean inspirational? Was there more to it than just the money?
Well, she was a poor lady, and she gave out money, but to me, sponsorship was more than money, more than what she paid. She gave her love. She expressed God's love to me. She taught me how important you can do something for others.
How did she do that all the way from Corranbong when you were near Bangalore?
Well, she wrote a number of letters. She wrote about 15 letters a year, and that was a great source of inspiration. So it meant sponsorship to me was not more. It's more than giving money.
There must have been times when you were maybe going through a tough time, and that letter just came at just the right time to help you through that difficult
Absolutely,
patch.
and she was a link for me to encourage me through Bible texts and Bible verses that really motivated me to get going higher and higher. And I'm so grateful that it's because of her that I'm today be able to, come to this level and be an inspiration to others.
Wow, that's incredible. You were telling me before our interview about you have a 6-year-old daughter who's quite passionate about child sponsorship at 6 years old. Tell me a little bit about her, just quickly before we finish.
I have been blessed with a daughter and a son, and my daughter is very passionate about, because when I go to schools and visiting, she would be there, "Daddy, I want to come." And I take her there to the schools, the deaf school, the orphanages, and she's so passionate about asking me all sorts of questions. And I tell them, and I tell her, these children do not have money, they do not have parents. She says, "Daddy, can I do something for her?" And she is so passionate about doing it. Currently, she sponsors a little girl in one of the day schools.
Oh, you have a 6-year-old daughter who sponsors a child herself?
Yes.
Wow, no, that's incredible. That's an inspiration. Now, if we want to know more about Asian Aid, you've got a website, is that right?
Yes, you go to www.asianaid.org.
Okay, so that's asianaid.org.au if you're in Australia, that's right, or just .org for America. Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for your time today, Ravi Das. I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and may God bless your ministry.
Thank you.
Well, there's no doubt that child sponsorship made a massive difference in that guy's life. You can't argue with personal experience, can you, Ken?
I probably could, Dora, but I won't. But look, I think, there is still a very legitimate discussion on whether child sponsorship is the best way to go.
Yeah, that's true. Let's take a quick ad break now. We'll be back in a moment.
We live our lives running around, rarely stopping to ask ourselves where we're going and what our final destination is. In the end, our lives become little more than routine. Step beyond and discover a path that offers comfort, love and hope. Visit hopeoffer.com/step beyond or call 1300 300 389 for your free copy today.
We're going to start with some soybeans. Use some chickpeas, an onion, you have a teaspoon of salt, slice some tomatoes, slice some cucumber, some red onion just to give it a bit of freshness. So just make little falafels like this. They just smell amazing. Let's make our tahini dressing. Let's get in some tomatoes, cucumbers, some falafels. Drizzle some of this lovely dressing. All you need to do is roll it up and you've got a delicious lunch for your family.
Hi, welcome back. Now, a segment we introduced on InFocus during its later years looked particularly at religious freedom issues and featured the man who was our very own executive producer and human rights lawyer, James Standish.
Yeah, that's right. And in this segment, James looks particularly at the discussion around free speech and religious expression on uni campuses.
And it's also great to have James here. Hi, James.
I'm doing well, thanks, Ken.
Now, James, we're going to go a bit entertainment tonight on you today because we're talking about a movie. And you don't normally come in here to do a movie review, but you saw a movie just recently called God's Not Dead. Can you just give us a quick synopsis for our viewers who might not have seen it?
Well, God's Not Dead is a film about a conflict, if you like, between a student and a professor at a public university.
Okay.
And particularly it's taken in a philosophy class. And the question is, sort of Friedrich Nietzsche, is God dead? If it's and so forth. And there's a debate that goes on, and that sort of drives the narrative of the film.
Good. Would you recommend it? Good movie?
I'd recommend it. I don't think it's the greatest film I've ever seen, but at the converse side of it, I thought it was good, and I'm glad I went.
Yeah, I mean, we're here doing a religious freedom segment, James, and it's lovely to hear about, your weekend and everything, but how does this film relate to religious freedom in some way?
Yeah, it does, Kent, because interestingly, at the end of the film, there's a whole list of law cases that are listed out and that deal with religious expression on public campuses. And this has become a very big issue in the United States, where some schools have gone so far to say, basically, if something is religious, you can't participate in the public square of the campus in the same way as anyone else.
It's a secular university.
Well, that's the argument. Of course, the whole purpose of a secular university or a non-religious university is to have a broad array of views and not to censor any views out, particularly not to censor out religious views. So that's the debate.
What about in Australia or other countries?
Well, there's even been debates here, particularly over the pro-life issue. At University of Sydney, things went so far as, first of all, there were people petitioning that no pro-life group could participate because, well, that excludes the views of other people, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of ironic using free speech against free speech, and even going so far as at a University of Sydney open day where all the students put up their booths and so forth, the pro-life booth was attacked and vandalized. So this is happening in liberal, open, free speech Australia. It's also happening in the United States. And what we're seeing, I think, this is part of a broader trend, and it's a trend that I think we should really keep our eyes on, and that is this idea that that certain views, particularly religious views, are so far outside of the, quote, mainstream that they should be censored, they should be excluded, they should be shut down. In this particular case, students standing up for the proposition that life before birth should be protected. Now, people can disagree with that. Obviously, they do.
Yeah, it's controversial.
It's controversial. But obviously, so is the point that it shouldn't be protected controversial.
If you can't discuss a controversial issue on a university campus...
Then where can you? Where can you? What's the purpose of our education? So, this film, God's Not Dead, I would recommend to people not because it's the greatest script that's ever been written, not because the acting is so fabulous, or the acting is fine and the script is fine, but because it starts to raise the sort of issues that I think people have to deal with, and are increasingly having to deal with at a rather vulnerable age, where you just left home, you're off in college.
Trying to find your identity.
Yeah. Are you going to have the strength, if you're confronted, to stand up and say, you know what? I know that the majority position at this institution is opposed to a Christian belief that I hold dear, but you know what? Like Daniel, I'm going to stand up and say, I'm willing to wear that.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess we as the church need to be able to prepare prepare and protect and support those students who are going through those situations.
I think you're absolutely right, although to protect is probably impossible. Prepare is actually more important.
Great. Thanks for your time, James.
Pleasure.
Wow, I think a lot of us would have no idea that these kind of struggles and debates are going on at unis.
Yeah, well, student politics, if I remember correctly, is a pretty rough and tumble affair, Dora. And, it's where a lot of our politicians actually started their careers.
Yeah, that's so true. And they still haven't grown up since.
Oh, yeah.
So did you get to see the movie yourself, Ken? Or?
Yeah, I did actually. Not the sequel that came out this year, but the first one.
Yeah.
And I'd have to agree with James. It is worth a look, but it would probably work best for probably an older teen audience. A great youth group discussion starter, I'd say.
Oh, sounds awesome. Hey, it's time for an ad break now. We'll see you in a sec.
Father, I can't connect the dots through the little that I understand. What words can I say to reach you? How can I know that you are there, listening, hearing, caring? My words are broken, weak, and powerless. But I know your power is limitless. What can I say?
Onions add great sweetness and flavour and a good base to any curry. Going to add some ginger, some garlic. Look at that, nice and chunky. So we've got our spices, gives it kind of a Sri Lankan feel. Add some tomatoes, tomato paste, some honey. Roasted vegetables in these kind of dishes are always great. If we add some creaminess to it, and that dish is now finished, ready to hit the table. I'd recommend you to give it a try, and it's so, so easy.
Hi, welcome back. Now, in our last interview for today, we're going to meet a really interesting guy. He's from a Jewish family, but is now an Adventist pastor who spent many years of his working life reaching out to his fellow Jews.
Wow, okay, let's take a look. A pleasure to welcome to the studio and to introduce to you Dr. Richard Amram Elofa from let me get this right, Richard, the World Jewish Adventist Friendship Center.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that right? Now, you're based in Paris, is that right?
I am based in Paris. I was based 15 years in Israel because I was a president of the Seventh-day Adventist Church there. But 2 years ago, I got this position full-time. Then I decided to go back to Paris, where my family is.
So over the years, Dr. Elofa, there's been a lot of tension between Christians and Jews, and there's a lot of history behind that. Sadly, on the Christian side, pogroms and all sorts of persecution. But you're now involved in a Jewish Adventist Friendship Center. What does that involve? What bridges are you trying to build?
Because when we look at the Bible, we see that at the end of the time we have to bring back the Jews to Jesus.
Right.
And when we look at the history, we discover that in the first century, the Jews believed easily to Jesus. Thousands and thousands of Jews. In fact,
Jesus was a Jew. His disciples
Jesus was a Jew.
It was a Jewish movement.
And it was a Jewish movement. All the first believers were Jews. But in fact, with the history and what you have mentioned from this conflict between Christians and Jews, we discover now the biggest obstacle between Jews and Jesus is the church. And that's why we have to work first in reconciliation between the church and Israel if we want to help the Jews to believe again in Jesus.
So what does that involve? What does reconciliation involve exactly?
Reconciliations means, in fact, to comfort the people of Israel, to be on their side, to be ready to support them and to help them when they have difficult time. And that's why I preach in every church where I go this verse from Isaiah 40 verse 1, comfort, comfort my people, says your God.
Now, Seventh-day Adventists in particular, I mean, often Seventh-day Adventists are accused of being a bit Jewish because of the seventh-day Sabbath, basically. Are there other crossovers between Adventist doctrine and practice and Jewish doctrine and practice that make it easier for an Adventist to connect with the Jew?
In fact, we have to remember that all what we receive as Christian came from the Jewish people.
True.
We have the same God. We have the same Bible. We have the same hope in the resurrection and the kingdom of God and the Messiah. We have the same hope in the Messiah. And in fact, the Adventists have been a little bit further because they have accepted the full Bible completely with the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. Then, for example, we have the same lifestyle together with the Jews.
In terms of clean and unclean meats?
And unclean meats and things like that.
Now, I understand that in some parts of the world, Dr. Alofa, there are actually what you might call Christian synagogues.
We call that today Jewish Adventist congregation.
Okay.
We are very careful to call that synagogue because, in fact, the word synagogue is used by the Jewish people.
Okay.
And we don't want to be to replace Israel.
Sure.
We don't want to be in this replacement theology.
Okay. In some Jewish Adventist congregations, if I've got the terminology right, you use, or some of those congregations use a very Jewish form of worship, even though they are worshipping Jesus the Messiah, Yeshua.
Yeah, because in fact we would like in our congregation to respect the Jewish identity. We use, for example, the shal of prayer. I bring one of these shal of prayer here with me to show you what is that. You have certainly seen Jews with this shal of prayer.
This is the prayer shawl.
Yeah.
And what does this say on here?
That is a blessing which say, praise are you, Lord, our God, King of the universe, who commanded us to bear the tzitzit. And the tzitzit are the tassels.
Oh, the tassels. Okay.
Yeah, because in fact, what is written in the Bible in Numbers chapter 15, from the verse 30, it is not written to have a prayer shawl. It is just say we must have tassel on our
the four
clothes,
corners of your
and because the Jews in the time of the Bible had that all the time on their clothes, on their jacket, because a tailor made that for them. They were Jewish tailor, but today not anymore. And that's why the Jews say to follow the commandment of God, we have at least to have the tassels for the prayer time.
Is there a risk, Dr. Alofa, that when you involve these sorts of parts of worship that it becomes a legalistic thing?
What is the meaning of legalistic? To be legalistic. That is the main point. Is to be legalistic is to follow the law of God. That is not the meaning of legalist.
No.
The legalists are people who say, I keep the Sabbath in order to be saved.
Yeah.
Salvation through the law. Salvation through the work. And that is legalism. But when we have this shal of prayer, prayer shal, it is not in fact to be saved. That has nothing to do with salvation. And because we want the Jews to be comfortable in our worship, then we say to them, you can have the prayer shal if you want. You can have the small hat, which is the kippah on your head if you want.
Yes.
But nobody is obliged to have the kippah. You understand?
Yes.
Everyone is free.
And it's not something that a congregation is going to enforce on its members?
Absolutely not.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Okay. One thing I find really exciting, Dr. Elofa, is that in New Zealand, in Wellington, there is right now one of these Jewish Adventist congregations.
Yes.
So right here in our part of the world.
Yeah, we have started this Jewish Adventist congregation about 1 year ago, and that's why I came back this year too for this ministry, and especially because they would like to start now new Jewish Adventist congregation in Rotorua and in Auckland. And
what about Sydney? There are a lot of Jewish people here in Sydney.
Yeah, now I am in Sydney and in Australia because I think we have to start a Jewish Adventist congregation in Sydney and in Melbourne. And I have already few names of people who are interested to start this ministry.
Wow, that's good to hear.
But we have to know that this ministry doesn't start like that. It takes time.
Like I say, reconciliation, building relationships, friendship.
Yeah, and we have to train our members to have this friendship.
Well, just before we finish, just quickly, you come yourself from a Jewish family, born in Morocco.
Yeah.
What was the thing that tipped the balance for you to accept Jesus?
Oh, in fact, it was when I met some people who were Seventh-day Adventists, and I was very surprised because I didn't know any Christian who was keeping the Sabbath and has some similarities like that with the Jews. And then I started to read a little bit more the Bible and the prophecy, and I discovered by myself that Yeshua could be the Messiah described in the Hebrew Bible.
The power of those prophecies was important for you.
Very important, yes.
Now, there might be some of our viewers, Dr. Elofa, who are interested in knowing more about the World Jewish Adventist Friendship Center. Have you got a website people can visit?
Yes, of course, Jewish Adventist, one word, jewishadventist.org.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah, and I produce a newsletter every week.
Okay.
People can just subscribe.
You can sign up for that. Is in English?
English, French, Russian, and Dutch.
And Dutch, there you go, four languages. So yeah, that website's right there on your screen. Check that out. And thank you so much, Dr. Richard Elofa, for your time
Thank you
today.
for your invitation.
Not a problem. And may God continue to bless your ministry.
Thank you. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Look, I don't know about you, Dora, but that kind of thing just fascinates me. You know, reaching people with the message of Jesus, but doing it in a way that is within people's own culture.
Oh, yeah, it's awesome what he's doing.
Yeah.
Well, that's about it from us today. Thanks so much for your company.
We really hope you enjoyed InFocus Recouched. All the best for the coming week. God bless.